Hello and welcome to episode 104 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark. Joining me on today's episode is, in my opinion, easily one of the best artists not only in the country but in the world. He has such a unique style that whenever I see his work, I instantly recognise it's one of Dan's. I am joined today by the absolutely awesome Dan Mumford. This is someone I've wanted to get on the podcast the moment I decided to go down the route of doing some artist specials, the voice behind the artists. And if you tuned in a couple of episodes ago, you'd have heard me launch this whole new section with the amazing Matt Ferguson. And now it's Dan's turn, and I can't wait to share this interview with you. From the moment we start talking, we hit it off, and he's absolutely awesome. One of my favourite interviews I've done on Mark and Me, and it'll be coming up very, very soon. But you know the score by now. I like to touch base and talk about the last episode. It was an incredible artist, an incredible producer, cold heart. The response was fantastic, and thanks to everyone that tuned in. I've seen some new followers come from it and a whole new audience. So thank you so much for Coldies for coming on the podcast, and thanks for you guys checking it out. But back to today. It's the whole voice behind the artist special. This is the second in a series of 5. And I'm thrilled that it's Dan's time. I first remember seeing Dan's work when I went to an Eddie Vedder concert in London about 4 or 5 years ago. His artwork stood out, and it was one of those ones that as soon as I knew who it was, I explored on Instagram and all the usual ways of finding out an artist and discovering then some of my favourite pieces of art. He's done stuff for Ghostbusters, The Descent, which is easily one of my favourite horrors I've ever seen. But like I've said, he has this style. As soon as I see it, I know it's his. He's an incredible guy, and I think the best thing to do now is get to the interview. So here's me and Dan Mumford talking all things art. Dan, thanks for joining me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
No problem at all. Good to be here.
What I wanted to do, Dan, is for those people that are listening that may have not discovered your work yet, is give them an idea about the person that you are. So taking it right back to when you were at school, were you someone that knew you wanted to be an artist at such a young age, or was it later on in life that you found that kind of love and passion?
I definitely always enjoyed artwork in most capacities at school. I didn't really have much interest in any of the sciences and stuff like that. So, I played music, I created artwork. I quite enjoyed like English literature, so like writing stories and making up worlds and stuff. So I always knew it was going to be something creative that I ended up doing. The path of art wasn't necessarily chosen until it was kind of a flip of a coin, actually. Like as I was sort of graduating from secondary school to university, it could have gone into like literature, writing stories and stuff, or artwork. And I think in the end, I was just like, I'm probably a better artist to an extent,
Yeah.
And that was it. And I just sort of went from there, really. Yeah.
And was it at that point that you believed in yourself enough to know that you could hopefully make a career out of it, or were you doing kind of jobs, or how did it work out that you got that balance? Because every artist I've spoke to recently have always had to work in a record shop or selling stuff, and it's really been hard to juggle it so it could then become just the sole focus.
Oh no, I mean, I think from 18 is when I went to art school, university.
Yeah.
And from 18 until 23, I wasn't making any money at all. Like, I think I got my first proper job as an artist as I was graduating from university, and that was around 2007, 2006. So, like, I actually had a sort of slightly strange journey through university. I did a foundation year, which is where you just sort of explore lots of different things. And then I did a university degree, but I actually sort of had a false start and only did half of 1 year because the course was awful.
Oh, okay.
So I left the course and then started another course. So like basically I spent about 5 years at university, sort of.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I worked like a few odd jobs throughout that time. I was working at a pharmacy for a while.
Yeah.
But no, I wasn't really making any money until I was pretty much graduating. And then luckily it kept going. I've not had to stop since I graduated. So that's really good.
So when you graduated and you're doing these pieces of work and finally getting some money for the time and effort you've been putting in, what were these sort of projects you were getting to work on? Can you remember the early ones where you were actually receiving checks and thinking, "Wow, this is awesome"?
Oh yeah, it was basically all music based stuff. So when I was younger, I played in a lot of bands, and so I was part of quite an active music community, and that meant that I had a lot of friends that were still part of the music community, and they had gone on to have careers. So while I was at university, they were sort of forging their paths and either working in like labels and stuff, or putting on shows, or in active bands that were now signed and touring. So I ended up working with them a lot of the time, like doing gig posters and t-shirt designs and CD covers. And that slowly sort of turned into a sort of full-on career path where I was essentially designing and creating artwork for lots of alternative music bands. And that was like the start for the first few years.
And can you remember the first time you maybe got like an album cover that you thought was quite an established band or something that you were like, "Wow, I'm so proud, I can actually see it, this is me"?
I'm trying to think what the very first one was. So the one that most people know me for doing was I worked with the band Gallows,
Yeah.
and that was the first one where it was properly, fully all over the place. And in you know, you could go into uh, Virgin record stores. You could go in there and it would be there, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. But the very first one, I think it was this band. It was a band called like Break the Sky, I think, and it was the artwork doesn't look anything like my artwork, but I think that was the very first one where I actually had a physical thing in my hands, and I was like, okay, I'm into that. Like that
Yeah.
feels really good, you know. And that, and as well as like a couple of T-shirts that were, you know, again, they're very crude in comparison to what I do now, but it was that light bulb moment, you know, where you sort of go, okay, this is viable, if you will. You know, I can do this, and people seem to want me to do it. So that was really good.
And you're saying now, obviously, after uni, you're doing quite a lot of band work and stuff in the music scene. When was it you kind of broke out of that and then started doing stuff to do with films and obviously lots of movies and posters and theme posters for certain releases?
I think it was around 2014. So it was a good 5, 6 years where it was mainly music stuff. Um, and then it wasn't like an instant transition or anything. It was quite a slow process, just sort of working with a few different sort of clients and brands. There's a gallery called Dark City Gallery based in the UK.
Yeah.
So it's an online thing, but you know, they were probably the first people to reach out to me and say, "Have you ever thought about doing, you know, an alternative movie poster?" And I think the very first one we did was for The Wicker Man,
Lovely.
and that was amazing because like it ended up being actually used by Studio Canal for the re-release of the film in the
Yeah.
cinemas. So the actual giant, you know, posters you'd see down on the tube when you're getting the train or something, like they had my artwork in it. That was pretty cool. And again, that was probably a moment where I went, okay, so this is also a viable option for my artwork, because you need those moments where you see your artwork put into a different medium to go, all right, so people like this, you know.
Yeah.
And from there, I did a few with them, and then I started working with a few galleries in America, Gallery 1988 and Hero Complex Gallery. And, you know, I've had really good relationships with them over the past few years where, you know, we just do quite a lot of work together. And then, yeah, and then from there, it just sort of all sort of bloomed outwards, you know, quite a bit of stuff came from that.
And when you're then venturing out into music and you've done movie posters now as well, was there anyone that you were looking at as an influence? Were you kind of taking any inspiration from certain artists? Because I don't think your art really looks like anyone else. So when you can see some artists that you think, oh, they've been inspired
Yeah.
by Drew, who everyone always mentions, and then we get this and we get that. But I don't see that you're, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but when I look at your poster, I know it's you, and I don't see that it's looking like, oh, that looks a bit like the Back to the Future poster, or that looks like Star Wars. You've got your own
Sure.
style.
Well, do you know what? It's quite an interesting one. So I think my style is very much me. I think, yeah, people can quite easily look at a piece of work and know I've done it, which is a good thing. That it's good to have your own stamp on stuff.
Yeah.
And about 5 years ago, there was this moment where I was with it was the owner of Hero Complex Gallery. I'd gone over to LA and I was just sort of hanging out at the gallery, and we were just talking about work and sort of people's style and stuff. And I was looking at someone's artwork that they had. I was like, wow, this is beautiful. Like, it's really, the way they're doing it, the style, the sort of the shading. It was sort of really quite just elegant, like my work is very much hard lines. Okay, so like, people joke about it. There's just lots of line work, lots of lines in my artwork. That's kind of how it's me or whatever. But what I realized in that point, because I was looking at this artwork going, oh, maybe I should try and do stuff more like this, sort of like more smooth, slightly not airbrushed, but a bit more elegant, if you will.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Adam, the owner of the gallery, and he went, why would you do that? Like, what you do is what you do, and that's your style. And I sort of went, oh, you got a point. Like,
yeah.
I'm kind of known for doing stuff like I do it now. And if I do stuff that's more like that, then I'll just sort of get lost in the, in however many artists are doing stuff like that. So it was at that point that I kind of decided, actually, maybe I'll lean harder into the way I work, refine it in my own way. Like, every year I find new tips and tricks and little things that make my work better. And I do try new things. Like, you can't just keep recreating the same old thing again and again. But that moment was really important to me, because I went, all right, I'm not going to try and be like anyone. I'm not going to look at someone's artwork and go, oh, I should try and do that. And it was a really big moment for me. And I'm really glad I had that conversation, because I think it actually steered me away from certain things. And there's a few pieces that I did maybe about 5 years ago, actually, where I was experimenting with little different things, and I was sort of trying to do like stippling shading and stuff like that. And I did that for a few pieces, and it just wasn't me, So yeah, I don't take influence from much, really. Other than movies. I enjoy movies. That's where I get a lot of influence.
And in your kind of way of doing, so I'm trying to look at the process in which you work, and say one of my favorite pieces you did was for Neil Marshall's The Descent, which I think is one of the best horrors out there. I just think it's an absolute masterpiece. Tell me how it goes. So say you're asked to work on The Descent, or you choose to want to do a design for The Descent. Now, the classic poster we've all seen with the skull being made up of the girls kind of kneeling down is very different to yours of the girls entering the cave. It's very, very your poster's very much played on the light element of the flame and stuff. In your head, how do you look at the original poster, or does that then put you off because you want to be completely different, or do you just go in with this mind of watching the film and then kind of brainstorming ideas on how does it actually work?
Well, firstly, if it's a film I haven't seen, I will always watch the film. That's quite important to me, to at least have a thorough, fundamental understanding of what the film is about, what's important about it, who's important in it. And what can I pull from that movie that speaks to you on the poster? The Descent, luckily I had already seen it quite a few times. I think it's a great film as well. And with that poster, so I worked with that with Dark City Gallery. Actually, that was one of my earlier movie posters. And me and Ross, the owner, he had the license to do this poster, and he was like, let's just try and do, well, firstly, we just threw a few ideas around, but it was like, let's do something that's different. And always, I think that's quite important, is to put your own spin on something. So I will look at what's out there for a film already.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to recreate it at all. You don't want to just be like, oh, you've used the same classic pose of this character, or the color scheme's the same or something. And obviously sometimes the colors within a film can be very important, and you do want to get that across in a poster. But I also try and make it a bit different. I don't want to just rely on what people already associate with that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, there's the film Drive, the Ryan Gosling film.
Yeah.
Like every single poster for that is pretty much pink themed. Okay, pink is throughout that film for some reason in all the posters. So if someone makes a new poster for Drive now and it has a bit of pink in it, pinky purple, and it's just like, well, it's just lost amongst all the other Drive posters.
Yeah.
So, you know, give me a poster for Drive that has, I don't know, blues in it,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
greens. I don't know. I mean, I guess the point is people don't associate the film with those colors, so they're not going to want to buy it, maybe. So
I understand.
yes, sorry.
Like even the vinyl, everything for that, everything's pink. So I've got the sound pockets pink. The logo is always pink. Everything seems to be just pink. But I'd like someone to be a bit braver and just go with the yellow scorpion, or like the elevator scene or something like that. Just try and make it different instead of just you know, that, like, it looks like a sign, doesn't it, on like a sort of roadside restaurant, that kind of sign drive, and it's just always very samey.
Yeah, it's just, you know, I think a lot of people get stuck in that trap when they're trying to come up with something new, of just relying on the sort of generic tropes that are associated with that film. So with The Descent, like, we were just like, well, let's just do something that's kind of its own thing, and it's quite an odd composition, actually. Like, it's not the sort of thing I would probably do now, but I think at that time I was quite not brave's not the word, but I was quite happy to I was quite happy to explore different compositions and try different things, and it's, you know, it's just little silhouettes of people exploring a cave. But if you actually look at the poster closely, you've got the monsters sort of just dotted around the sides, very very dark. You can't really see them, and I think that's the important thing about The Descent, is what you can't see in the film, because the monsters are basically hidden for the whole film. And those are I've seen quite a few posters that use that effectively, and just do different sort of compositions with that in mind. So, you know, I guess that's something that we did that is in other posters, but then the composition itself and what's happening in it is, you know, a little bit different, and the color as well. It's sort of greeny purples and stuff. So yeah, it was a fun one to work on.
I remember it was actually only I think it's just over 12 months ago. I went to Wembley Stadium to see The Who. Now, I didn't buy a ticket to see The Who. I went to buy a ticket to see Eddie Vedder, because Pearl Jam are easily one of my favourite bands. And just before the day, I think it might have been the day before, they announced the merchandise range. You know, your pin badges and your T-shirts. And suddenly I saw a poster of Eddie walking with his guitar towards Wembley, and there's the Who logo. Instantly, I was like, fucking hell, that's Dan. Like, that's Dan's work. Look at it. I was like, I need that. So me and my best friend Darren, we went down to Wembley, got there really early. We had to watch the Kaiser Chiefs. It was that early. We got there, but the good news was we managed to get a poster each, and they sold out really quick. But how did it come about that you got to do that and work with fucking Pearl Jam, man?
Well, do you know what? That's been a real fun journey, actually. I think that's been about 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
And there's been maybe a poster or two each year. And the first one I did was for Eddie Vedder, and it was a London show, but it wasn't that one. It was I can't remember who it was. I think it was Hammersmith, maybe. And that was him. The poster was him walking across the bridge towards the venue, and I didn't really realize at the time how crazy the fans would be for that poster, right?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, obviously I know Pearl Jam's a huge band. I know that, but you know, the poster went within seconds at the show, and when I put it on sale on my site, again within like 30 seconds. I'd never experienced anything like that before.
No.
And, you know, I got lots of emails afterwards like, what the hell, man? I couldn't get a poster. It was gone before I'd even like seen it. And I was like, oh, okay, wow, this is a big deal, right?
Yeah, massive.
And then I ended up doing 2 more Eddie Vedder posters, and we sort of continued the journey. And it was him walking across a bridge every time.
Yeah.
So there's like a cool trilogy of posters of him doing that. And then I did one for Pearl Jam, which was like, it's like, oh, we've upgraded to the full band.
The full band now.
Yeah. Weirdly, I think people maybe go a bit more crazy for the Eddie Vedder solo posters. I'm not sure. But then we finally did one more for Eddie, and that was the Wembley one. And it was funny because Chris Sigling, who's kind of like the art director of these posters, I guess, he arranges everything, and he said, we don't want him going over another bridge. We've done enough bridges. So there's like this trilogy of him walking across a bridge. He was like, let's do something different. But I still wanted to do it with like Eddie walking to the show.
Of course.
Because I kind of like, I like that. It's like he's forever touring,
Yeah.
Not now, unfortunately, but yeah, so that was just a really fun one. It was kind of like, we'd done all these posters before, and at this point, like, I knew how important it is to get a poster like this right,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of eyes on it. It's going to mean a lot to so many people, and whenever I do anything for Pearl Jam or Eddie, I put my all into it,
Yeah.
like that. Those are posters where it's important to get it right. The details are all there, and just like that poster, things like getting Wembley Stadium correct, if you will. Like I spent a lot of time trying to draw that in the right way, looking at different angles and different photos. It's a real pain to draw, but that was a really fun one to do. And it was good that we also got to put the Who logo in there. I don't think we could put the actual words The Who in it, but we got the little Spitfire symbol, so that was good to have that in there.
Isn't it crazy with their fans as well, that the fact that as we sit here now, I think it was less than 24 hours ago, you put on sale the Pearl Jam poster for a gig that never happened, and I've seen already on Twitter, fucking hell, I got it in my basket and couldn't even get to checkout before it sold out. Like, these fans just are insane. They're buying posters for gigs that never happened.
Yeah, I mean, that was a real shame. So I think Pearl Jam had a full run of shows lined up for the release of their new album, and pretty much I think my show was the 23rd, 25th of March, and that's basically when everything just locked down, and it's funny because I think at the time I had the posters. They were all printed. I think all of the artists had their posters, and we're all just sort of waiting for the release, for the show to happen. And I hadn't even thought about it, but then I got this email and I was like, yeah, of course that show's not going to happen. There's going to be thousands of people there. Like that can't happen, can it? But yeah, like 5 months later, I think it was sort of decided that, those shows are postponed. And I think when they do happen, it will make sense to do something new, I guess, new artwork. And it was just, it's a weird one. But I think Pearl Jam's such a huge band for the fans and the sort of collectors of the, things that are associated with them, that having a poster for a show that never even happened, like that must be a bit of a holy grail, like
that's the golden, like, look what I've got.
Yeah, like that must be really special. I think in a few years' time, that's going to be a real weird one to own. And I don't know of any other bands that really did that actually recently. I actually have a few posters for shows that never happened, because it's happened a couple of times with me where a show's had to be rescheduled or it's cancelled for whatever reason, and I've already got the posters. So, but we've not done anything with them. So I just I've kept a few aside. So I've got these like really weird special one-offs that no one else has. It's pretty amazing.
That could be a retirement fund.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think like when I'm 60, I'll like unearth these posters like for the shows that never happened. That'd be pretty good actually.
When I was, because obviously I'm doing a special at the moment on a few different artists, and it's a world that I'm delving into. Where normally I've been talking to producers and actors and directors and bands and stuff, and it's fascinating. But when I was kind of prepping my questions and sort of doing some research, my girlfriend was saying to me, I wonder if these artists ever now get to draw for pleasure and actually just get to relax and draw. And one thing I've found by talking to a number of artists is they just don't have the time. It's work, 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 work now. And I was wondering with yourself, if you ever can just sit there over a cup of tea on a Sunday or in the week and just draw for fun and remember the days where you could just sketch things that you want to sketch instead of it being a, can you do this for us? Or can you do this project? Or can you draw this person or this film?
Yeah. No, basically. I think what happens, or what probably tends to happen for a lot of artists in the same sort of line of work as me, is you're sort of building up to a point where you're in demand to an extent. So people want to work with you, which is a great thing. And you're basically sort of working away on stuff. And then before you know it, the year's over. And every year for the last few years, I've sort of gone, all right, time to take a bit of time for myself this year. Let's just take a month off and do some personal projects. And it just doesn't happen, because if a good job comes along, it's really hard to say no.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky in that, you know, every month or two, a really good job will come along where I'm like, okay, I need to do that now. Like, I have to do that.
Yeah.
And it does turn work into, well, it turns it into work. Yeah. It turns, so when I've got free time at the weekend, I don't work at the weekends really. I try and take them off all the time. I sort of do a Monday to Friday 9 to 6 schedule, which I think is pretty important. So when I've got time free, I don't want to draw. And the other thing is, I think the older you get, so I mean, I'm not that old, I'm 36, but as you get older, responsibilities build up. You know, I've recently got a mortgage now, so I have to pay that. You know, bills, living, just stuff like that.
Yeah, being an adult.
Being an adult, yeah. So it's really hard to say. It's really hard to say, I want to put this week aside for me, when actually that week could be, I don't know, something that pays a couple of grand or something.
Yeah.
You know, and you sort of go, well, I'm definitely going to do that instead. But the problem is, realistically, for someone like myself, if I want to, I don't know, take my career to the next level, then I probably need to spend a bit of time on like some personal development with my work and stuff, and work out what that next stage is. And the only way to do that is by taking time off and sort of calming down a bit. So I probably need to like just stop for a bit, and then who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's a tough question that I've posed myself for the last few years. And actually this year was meant to be a bit of a chill out year, but then coronavirus really hit, and like most people, instant panic, you know. So I'm not gonna turn down that job. I'm gonna work and try and squirrel away as much money as I can in case things go completely wrong, you know. So.
And looking back at obviously most of the designs you've done so far, what's been your kind of personal favourites? I know that it must be quite hard to take a single piece or one design, but has there been one that you would frame and have in your lounge, or, you know, your main, look at this is my favourite piece, or the one you've enjoyed the most?
Yeah, it's really hard. What's my favourite? I don't know that I have a favourite really. I think the thing I'm most proud of is the 12 posters I did for the Star Wars, the newer Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
So I did 4 for each of those films, and they make up a giant set of 12 essentially. And you know, I'm extremely proud of that. I'm extremely gracious that Lucas and Disney allowed me to do that in such a huge official capacity. That's probably the biggest project I've worked on. It's probably the project where it's reached the most people.
Yeah.
You know, there's hundreds of thousands of copies of each of those prints out there. You know, I think every in the UK, it was like most. I think it was at Cineworld, maybe View. I think most of those cinemas had the posters. Like you would just get one when you went to see the film.
Yeah.
It's so many copies. So that's the one where I know it really got my artwork out to the world. And that's, I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
There's things I change in them, as there is with all artwork. There's definitely stuff in there where I'm sort of like, I wish I'd done that better. But that's hindsight, and sometimes you just got to get stuff done.
I wonder with that as well. I mean, I'm not an artist. I am terrible at drawing, but I wonder when it's time that you can say it's finished, because with editing of a podcast, I'm always sitting there and polishing bits. I'm taking bits out and then thinking, and I need to give myself like a deadline. Like, look, this needs to be done by tomorrow. If I don't, it's delayed. So I'll set myself up to fail. I'll like put a tweet out saying brand new episode out in the morning. So I'm like, look, there's your deadline now. With yourself, you've released pictures for Star Wars, one of the biggest franchises ever. And you're still saying right now you wish you'd change this, or this isn't quite. Yeah. How do you kind of get to the point where you can be that kind of strongly disciplined to say, that'll do now, I need to go to bed, and that'll be it?
Well, do you know what? With stuff like that, it's generally because there's a deadline.
Yeah.
And it will be the sort of thing where, so those posters specifically, the Star Wars ones, they were nearly always created between, let's say, September and late November, when the film was probably coming out in December. So, they were a few months out from the release of the films, and the deadline essentially was, they've got to be done at least a month before the film's coming out, which is annoying because I haven't been able to see the film. So, I'm working with all of those. I was working off trailers and notes from higher ups and stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's elements where you're like, well, I think this is probably correct, but maybe it's not. Someone's going to have to tell me if it's not correct, But it's very much like, I've got to get this done this week so I can get on to the next one, and then the week after the next one. And then amongst that, I'm doing other stuff. And generally at the end of the year, not this year, but for the last 5 years, I was always doing a show out in LA. And of course, this year there's nothing this year. There's no show in LA. There's no Star Wars film. So actually this year I'll have a really chilled out Christmas time. But that's always been a really busy period of the year for me. So it kind of would just be, I actually would have a schedule pretty much set out where it would be, this is the day this is finished, and the next day I move on to the next one. And you just got to do that, really. I'll always put in a little bit of extra time. So it'll be like, I'm finishing it on this day, but maybe it's been submitted in 3 days' time. Yeah. So it gives you that little buffer to look at it the next day and say, what the hell was I thinking? That looks awful. Like it might. And generally, especially because I'll be working on stuff like that, this happens probably more in the winter, because the light goes at around 4 o'clock, and then it gets dark and the studio's sort of lit, and you're looking at the screen and it's like burning your retinas out. And then the next day you'll come in and sort of go, what are these colors? They're awful. Like in the daylight, they really look wrong, and you have to adjust stuff. So I always, this is a really good tip for anyone working with clients. Don't submit your artwork at the end of the day. Submit your artwork the next day in the morning, because it gives you that little buffer to look at it and go, I should change this. This doesn't look quite right, So that's, I don't know. It's done when it's done, basically.
Yeah.
But it's always tough. Always really tough.
And a question I've asked everyone, it doesn't matter if it's an actor, director, producer, it doesn't matter who it is. Every guest that's come on the podcast, I like to end by asking their advice. So anyone that's listening right now that wants to become an artist like yourself, who's influenced by yourself, who loves your work and thinks, I wish I could be like Dan, I wish I could be an artist, I wish I could have my designs in cinemas. What advice do you give them to try and make a name for themselves in a world right now where it's absolutely full of designers? It's everyone's
Yeah.
doing art, everyone's got Instagram, everyone's putting up their work, but how is it that you can kind of be that next step ahead, or you can get to those places that others struggle with?
Do you know what? I feel very bad for anyone trying to start out right now, actually,
Yeah,
because I think when I've been within the art industry for 13 years now, so that's quite a long time, and I've managed. I had the lucky situation of being around when these social media trends began, if you will.
yeah,
So I've been able to build up a following slowly but steadily.
yeah,
It's not been like from 1,000 to 100,000 in a year or so.
yeah,
That's been like over the whole time. So, and social media, whatever anyone says, it's vital. It's vitally important
yeah,
for you to get your work out there right now. I don't think, I think for a long time there were people who were like, oh, I don't bother with Instagram, I don't bother with this, whatever. Like, if you're an artist, Instagram's like I think it's important, because
yeah,
that's where I see a lot of new artwork. That's where I know a lot of art directors see a lot of artwork. Like, that's the thing. Don't think about it too much as like something, if you want to get your artwork out there, then use something like Instagram as a tool to do that. You don't have to put your face on it. It doesn't have to be
no,
about you personally. It's about your artwork. And like, just remember that like a lot of art directors, that is where they find stuff nowadays.
yeah,
Have a website, have a Behance profile, use Twitter. All of this stuff does really help.
yeah,
And then the other thing I would say is like, don't try and copy other artists too much. Like,
no,
just do stuff in a way that you find comfortable. So if you're working on something and it doesn't feel natural to you, then that's not the way you should work. Like, there will be a natural path, or there'll be a flow that works for you. And I think, that kind of goes back to what I was saying, where I was worrying about my style not being like certain other people's stuff.
yeah.
And, you know, what it, when I was trying other stuff out, it didn't work for me. It didn't feel correct. So just work in a way that is comfortable for you. That's the best thing I can say.
And that way you became Dan, where you didn't want to
Yeah,
be Dan who
yeah,
was trying to be like so and so. You became your own person, and I
exactly.
think that's
Yeah,
benefit in the fact that I'm not just saying this because you're sat here now. I know your artwork. I know it when I see it.
sure.
I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, that's Dan. Some artists out there, I'm like, oh, I think that might be so and so, and I look, oh, it isn't. It's, oh, I can see why I thought that. But isn't that
yeah.
so important and such a? I think to. I don't think there's a bigger compliment than someone saying, "I know your work. I can identify it's
Yeah,
you."
for sure.
Seeing the
Yeah,
design, I think that's the ultimate compliment.
yeah. And I mean, and I don't mean what I'm about to say in a bad way against some artists, but there's a few artists that have sort of definitely tried to work in a similar style to me, and that's, firstly, it's really cool that my artworks influenced them.
Yeah,
Like, I can only be happy about that. That's awesome. Like, I think it's great that I've reached people to an extent like that. But it's kind of backfired in that I get tagged in this artwork and they'll be like, "This is a great piece from Dan," and I didn't do it.
you're like, not
So
me.
yeah. So I like this is quite often, like, a good few times a year, I'll be getting credit for someone else's artwork when it wasn't me.
Yeah,
So that's backfiring against them a bit. And in that situation, it's like, yeah, you need to put your own voice in this a bit more, because it's not like visualizing as you as an artist. And but again, like, I'm not saying that as a bad thing against them,
no, of
because
course not.
it's great that they are doing stuff and creating artwork. Like, again, I'm always just happy that people are creating artwork regardless of where they get their influence. But yeah, the more you can do for yourself, the better, definitely.
And my final question is, what's left for you on a personal level? So if I had said to you 15 years ago, you'll be doing 12 posters for the Star Wars films, and you can go to a cinema and it'll be this, and you'll be doing Pearl Jam, you probably would have gone, fuck off, that's never going to happen. That's
Yeah, probably.
Ahead of you now, you obviously said that you were doing music and you're doing artwork for bands and you're doing covers. Then you explored into doing movies, which has opened so many new doors for you. What's next for you? What is the kind of things that you'd love to achieve that before you could retire, you could say, I'm really glad I got to do that,
That is the big question that I don't even know the answer to, because realistically right now, I'm at a point where working on more movie posters, it's not like I go, yeah, I can't wait to do a poster for that new whatever film, like it's always fun because I love movies and I'll always want to do it, but I've done quite a lot of it now.
Of course.
So I do need like a new big challenge, if you will. And I think it is realistically doing my own stuff, doing something that is not related to anything, something that's not restricted by sizes or like time, anything like that. I'd love to just create gigantic pieces that are the size of a wall.
Yeah.
And just do some sort of weird gallery show and things like that. And it purely comes down to money and time, really. Yeah. And that was what I wanted to do this year, but then the world went
mental.
The world broke.
Yeah.
And, and now it's like, and a lot of that stuff's just have to go on the back burner. But I think I have to do that because otherwise I'll lose the passion,
Yeah.
And right now I'm passionate about everything I do right now, and I love doing movie posters and gig posters, and I want to keep doing them, but I need it to be like 60% of what I'm doing and not 100%, I think.
Yeah.
Because I'll just burn out otherwise.
Of course.
I'll run out of ideas as well. So, just need to do something slightly different, I think, coming up. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. I've really enjoyed this, and it's like I sometimes forget I'm doing the interview and I'm listening away. I'm like, oh God, I need to ask a question because I'm loving your answers, and it really has been an absolute pleasure to have your time. And I can't wait to see more of your work, and when the world goes back to normal, where you're going to go.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Yeah, no, it's been really nice talking to you.
So there it is. There's my interview with me and the absolutely awesome Dan Mumford. What a great guy, such a talent, and from start to finish I absolutely love this interview. I feel I could have talked to him for absolutely hours, and hopefully we'll do a second or third part because I really do believe we could have talked just about art and movies for easily another 3 or 4 episodes worth of material. It's been incredible to go on this new journey with Mark and me, even after 3 or 4 years, to now start exploring new avenues and talking to all these new artists. It adds a whole new dynamic to the podcast, and I'm absolutely loving the guests that I've been getting on. If at this point you haven't jumped on Instagram and gone and checked out Dan's work, what the hell are you playing at? Jump on and follow Dan Mumford Draws. You will not regret it. He's almost got like 100,000 followers. All his prints are up there. You can go on the store and even purchase one. You won't regret it, and it's money well spent. I will be running a competition very soon for one of his pieces of work. Go on Mark and Me and honestly check out my Facebook, Instagram or Twitter, and the details will be up there very soon. But you'll be able to have an opportunity to win a signed print. That's what I do for you guys. See, you tune in, you listen to the podcast, and now you get the opportunity to win an absolutely awesome prize. A massive thanks again for Dan for coming on the podcast, and a massive thank you for you guys at home for listening. If you really want to support the podcast, like I said, go on markandme.com, share the episode. It costs nothing to hit that retweet button or the Facebook button to share, and tell people about the episode. It's incredible and a massive, massive impact you can have from just telling people about a podcast or sharing it. People see it on their feed and it makes a massive difference. Also, if you really want to support the podcast on another level, I have a Patreon page. It costs as little as £1 a month to support me, and at the moment you're getting 4 or 5 episodes per month, which is insane, and it's only going to get busier. I really appreciate everyone that's tuned in today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll be back in only a few days' time with a brand new episode. Take care, everyone, and speak soon.